like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Brentwood for October 14th to order, please. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. First order of new business is Resolution 2013-65, a resolution authorizing the exercise of an option to acquire certain property for the expansion of Marcella Vivrette Smith Park for adoption. Do I have a motion?
I move for approval.
Commissioner Smithson. And I hear a double second, Commissioner Gorman. Did I hear Commissioner Gorman correct? All right. Discussion.
Mayor and Commissioners, Debbie, if you can throw up my map there for me. As you know, when we purchased back in 2010 the original 320 acres that is now Marcella Vivrette Smith Park, we did acquire at the same time an option on what we have long called the back 80 acres. It's technically 77.89 acres in the kind of the northwest corner of what is now Smith Park. We have until December 1st of this year to notify the Smith family whether or not we intend to exercise that option. If not, it reverts to their ownership effective at the end of the calendar year. At the time we purchased the 320 acres, it was the stated view of the city that we hope that either through grants, fundraising, intergovernmental appropriations of one sort or another, that the most, if not all of that, roughly $3 million would be raised so that the city did not have to expend money to exercise that option. Since this time, we've applied for approximately $1 million worth of grants related to development of the original 320 acres and have been unsuccessful in that effort. The Citizens for Brentwood Green Space, as you heard earlier, are committed to raise $300,000 and are on their way to doing that. We had hoped that number perhaps could be higher with the sponsorship opportunities that we've partnered with them to offer, and those are certainly still out there, but at this point in time, that money is not going to be available to purchase the property. Whatever they do raise certainly will come to the city, and certainly if we purchase this, it's our recommendation that that money be put into the Park Trust Fund and be used only towards development costs related to Smith Park in the future. So we're at a point now with that option date of December 1st fast approaching that it's clear the only source of funds in order to purchase this property is going to come from the city. In assessing this property and whether or not to make a recommendation to you as to whether that's a prudent use of city funds, there's several factors that the staff considered. First and foremost is you can kind of tell from this picture that this is the center ridge line of the park. Most of this park is heavily wooded except this front area near the historic part of the property. This back acreage is generally flat, generally open, has a few natural features to it, but it's excellent parkland, to be quite honest with you, and is land that could be developed in any form or fashion for a variety of park uses, including active athletic fields, which we believe is something that has to be on the table as we move forward. As was mentioned earlier, the price of the option that we received in 2010 is $37,500 per acre. If you take that times the 77.89 acres, that amounts to $2,920,875. In today's market, that's probably 60 cents on the dollar or so, at least. So it's very good parkland at a very good price in today's market. As you know, when we adopted the master plan, we had the option, or we incorporated some features in what we were doing in Phase 1 that would facilitate easier development of that back 80 acres if we acquired it. Debbie, can you put up the master plan? Again, just to reorient, here's your back acreage. As you know, most of the work going on right now is up to the front and providing the access over CSX Railroad and into the historic home area. But a lot of the work also going on is the grading of this road, and the material being graded out of that road is what's being used for the fill material to build a bridge over CSX. So as part of Phase 1, we are doing a lot of the work necessary to provide the road that would access that back 80 acres already. So again, if we purchase that back 80 acres, the access to it becomes a lot easier in the future because of what we're already doing in Phase 1. And finally, as you can see, this is the proposed road across there. By purchasing that back 80 and eventually building that road, it opens up some of the existing parts of the 320 acres. There's been discussion tonight about a possible mountain biking area. This corner of the property in the master plan has been shown as a potential mountain biking area. It certainly has not been committed to that, but is conducive to that. And obviously, if we purchase that back acreage and go ahead and build that road across the ridge, then that opens that area up, as well as additional trailheads for hiking in the hills and such. So, and as also been mentioned, Carriage Hills is up here, and I can't see it good from here, but Carriage Hills Drive is somewhere right in here. So obviously, if this acreage is not purchased by the city and becomes part of the park, it's quite likely that that will be developed as a subdivision with its only point of access coming off the temporary dead end that is Carriage Hills Drive today. Obviously, an expenditure of $2.9 million is not something to take lightly. The only source of revenue at this point in time in the current fiscal year that we can commit to is the use of the city's reserve funds, the general fund under designated reserve funds. When you adopted the budget back in June, we had projected for you that the ending fund balance in those general fund reserves as of June 30th of 2013 was going to be $26.8 million. We told you at that time that that was a conservative estimate because we did not have the Hall income tax number in, which we don't get until August. We did get that number in August. In the fiscal year 13 distribution of the Hall income tax to the city was $3.27 million. We had budgeted $900,000, so that's $2.37 more than what was budgeted. So that adds to the fund balance that we had originally told you at the time the budget was adopted. And as we go through some other final year-end stuff and all the bills are paid and the final revenues are counted, we're now projecting that as of, this is an unaudited number of course, but as of the end of June 30th, 2013, our fund balance instead of the $26.8 million will actually be $29.5 million, or about $2.7 million more than what we had told you with the budget. That number represents 91% of our fiscal year 14 general fund expenditure budget. As you well know, our goal is 40%. So we're still well in excess of that, and that actually would represent the highest fiscal year ending fund balance in the history of the city. Giving all those factors in terms of the land and what it costs, how it lays, what potential is for its use, and the city's financial position, it is staff's recommendation that it's a prudent use, a one-time use for a capital expenditure to acquire that land for the parkland. Again, at a cost of a little over $2.9 million. Going forward, obviously, that development of that property was phase 4 in the master plan, several more years out. As you'll note, the label there just says future improvements. Those of you who were on the commission when we did the master plan will recall the discussion. One, we didn't want to program it because we didn't know if we were going to purchase it. And two, even if we did purchase it, it was going to be developed so many years in the future that we felt it was best to wait and make those decisions at the time that it's closer to development and knowing what the recreational needs of the community are at that time. So at this point in time, we have no plans to proceed with any development on that property. We'll mow the grass. We're estimating that to be about $15,000 a year for the short-term expenditure impact on the city of acquiring that property. The only thing we will do probably is once the park opens next spring is we'll work with the Carriage Hills Homeowners Association to provide a temporary access point, pedestrian access point. I'm going to emphasize pedestrian access point into there so they can access, the park facilities. Now they'll be on the wrong side of the park, but they can hike over the hills. That's what it's there for. But again, as also just for the Carriage Hills folks who are here, the commitment was made by this city commission and has not changed that even when developed, all vehicle access to that back 80 acres would come via the park entrance road and over the ridge, and that access point would be a pedestrian access, and that's still what we would propose to be going forward. I think that pretty much covers it. Certainly be glad to answer any questions that the commissioners may have.
Questions, Mr. Bednar? Vice Mayor.
To clarify, because some of the emails that I received were suggesting that if this was not purchased and developed as a neighborhood, the Park Road is not an option for an entrance to any residential development that might go on that property. Is
Correct. No, if it's developed as a subdivision, the only access point, public street access, would be off Carriage Hills Drive. This Park Road is not being designed as a public street. It will have a gate that closes at dark. It is not an access point for a subdivision.
Can I comment further? I really just want to thank everybody who came out specifically because of this issue, and I'm not a big fan of residential infill, but I appreciated hearing all your comments about how you use the parks or what you would be looking forward to if this purchase were to take place, because we all do love our parks, but we don't all use them the same way. So it's really enlightening for me to hear that. And honestly, this is really about as close to a no-brainer, I think, as I would get in an item of city business. Thank you, Mayor.
More comments?
Well, 4 years ago when we first saw the opportunity to do this, in fact, Mayor Regan was a very important part of that, and Mayor Sweeney also. It was in the height of the recession. This park will be a blessing for generations to come. But we had just gone through several months of decreasing revenues. I think there were still maybe a bank or two that were failing, and I'm not talking about little banks. And the $10 million seemed like a big step in faith, but kind of like the people that settled this land. The good thing about that it was a great value for the city, but it was also a good deal for the Smiths. And that old Scotch-Irish in me just couldn't resist a good value. Don't ever want to bargain at somebody's sacrifice, but a good value, a good deal that's good for both parties involved. That's sweet. But at the same time, we also knew the extra 80 acres, being $3 million, would probably be a step too far in the faith category, especially being the times. Revenues just turning, but still not for sure that revenues were going to return as they have. Not sure the economy was going to return. And so we got an option on that for 3 years at a great, great value. At the time, the value was good. Now it's great because the economy has returned. Land is selling. Banks are stabilizing. But this piece of property is prototypical Brentwood. Mr. Wilson up here, he knows what I'm talking about. It's your typical farm. You got your pasture land in the front. You got a ridge running right through the middle of it. And that ridge grows limestone. That's why so many people raise cows around here. Don't grow vegetation very good. But it's beautiful. It's big shagbark hickory. Beautiful bur oak. Not quite the size of the one we had at the library, but a few of them are approaching that size. The way the park's laid out, it's perfect for the wildlife we'll get in there. You've got your woods, but you've also got your pasture lands. You've got your border, your fringe areas throughout the park. So I imagine we'll have plenty of deer and fox and owl that'll cohabitate with us hiking or whatever we decide to do. And being good stewards of the land, there's lots there. There's plenty of woods for hiking trails and keeping pristine, but there's also some areas that'll make good athletic fields. And on top of all that, we've got this wonderful historical mansion that in and of itself would have been a blessing for decades to come to our city, to our county, to Middle Tennessee, to the state of Tennessee. Years from now, and I'm dead and gone, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, because I got faith they're still going to be here. I got faith our nation's still going to be doing okay. I got faith that Brentwood's going to be a wonderful place to live. Go in this park. It'll probably be the best thing I ever did in my whole life, was being part of this. Just one small part of it. I'm just one single commissioner. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us, the city and citizens of Brentwood. Thank you, Mayor.
Further comment?
I think the residents who spoke tonight summed it up pretty well. They listed all the good reasons why we should be doing this, and it's nice that we're of the same mind.
You know, I received a lot of emails on this, and I appreciate it. Thank you. We love to, anytime there's an issue, for any city issue, we like to hear what you're thinking and what you want to have happen. We represent you, and I think that's wonderful that we would listen to, this whole commission listens to the people in this city. The thing that is interesting about this extra 80 acres is, you know, if this were just sitting out somewhere else, maybe it would be a little more difficult for us to make that decision to spend $3 million. We have a wonderful 888 acres of parks right now before we purchased this. But because it finishes what we started, it takes into account probably the very best land on that park for the parkland. It completes a project and enhances it in a way that it'd be impossible for us to ever go back and buy this land at today's prices, or to add to a park like this will add to it. And you know, there are a lot of neighborhoods that say, oh, we've got a temporary dead end sign in our neighborhood and we don't want anything to go back there. And that would be a luxury that all of us would want to have. That's a wonderful thing, that Carriage Hills will not be impacted by a street that goes through. But we would not really probably buy 80 acres to keep a street from going through. I mean, you know, it just makes so much sense that it's part of this 320 acres that we've already acquired, that it's in a perfect spot, and you benefit from that street not going through. Another thing is houses won't be developed on it. And we have talked about development in our schools and the overcrowding, and you know, that's another thing that's a great benefit for us to be able to be in a position, like Kirk talked about the financial side of it, you know, to be a AAA bond rating with Moody's and Standard & Poor's, and be able to go out here and say, you know, we can enhance our park by buying this additional 80 acres. And I mean, all of us have heard so many comments on what a wonderful park system and bike trail system we have here. And it does increase the value of everyone's land, not just the people in Carriage Hills, but all of us. So I'm really excited about this. I'm excited that we have this opportunity and that we're in a position to do it. Thank you, Mayor.
Got lots of emails, and I'm assuming all of us got the same emails. And oddly enough, not oddly enough, but interestingly enough, they were all pro purchasing this piece of property. So Jill refers to it as a no-brainer. I think we're getting pretty close to that. But I only had one email, to be honest with you, that said, have you thought about this? They didn't say not to consider it. They just said, have you thought about this? I want you guys to know that we have thought about a lot of this. And I think once you get past the quality of life issue that a purchase like this brings to the city of Brentwood, then you look at the economic benefit and you know, the economics of it. And I think Kirk's already talked to you about that as far as where's the money coming from. I think this city is well positioned to make a purchase such as this. I'm particularly thankful for the Smiths for making this available to us. And I'll let you guys know, if we haven't already said it, is that the Smiths, if this did not pass tonight, if this doesn't pass and we don't purchase this, that they actually do better developing this than they do letting us have it for the $37,000 an acre that they're going to let us have it for. So it makes good economic sense, and I'm thankful that they have made this available to the city. And I'd be redundant if I kept talking, but everybody's pretty much said that it's a good move, and I thank you guys for being here tonight. I thank you for the emails that you sent in, and it does help us as we contemplate decisions like this. So thank you very much.
Mr. Gorman.
Just one comment. I'm not going to repeat what everybody has eloquently said up to this point, but somebody pointed out kind of a small fun fact as it relates to the size of this park. Having been to Central Park in New York City, someone pointed out, they said, do you realize that this is bigger than half the size of Central Park in New York? And I kind of paused a little bit, and then I thought, all right, I'm going to Google that just to make sure that that's accurate. But Central Park in New York is 778 acres and serves that very large area up there. So, while it will be an expense and an ongoing operating expense to the city that we'll manage through, what a nice addition to the park portfolio. Thank you, Mayor.
Actually, to Commissioner Gorman's point, that is, who wouldn't want to buy a park? But then you got to think about, well, once you acquire it, what do you do with it? And also, how do you maintain it? Do we have the fiscal means to do that? Is this a wise buy when we're talking about years from now? Sure, you want the amenity, but can we afford it? And we certainly looked at those figures too. I had a couple of folks send me emails saying, have you really looked at the maintenance? Have you looked at the outlay for years to come? And indeed we have. And indeed we'll continue to do that. That's part of what we do well in the city of Brentwood, is we don't make quick decisions and go, oh, wow, we had a windfall on this money, we're going to buy this. We look at what we do, we plan it out, and we do that over a period of years for a reason. And that being said, I didn't wear green just because I'm partially Irish. So, are we ready for a vote?
Mayor, can I add one thing? Not
Sure.
about ours, but Mark, something you said. I think I was the one who brought up Central Park. Well, I've been reading more of that book. That was a swamp originally, and I did not know this. A lot of people here may have known it. Every feature in there is man-made, every single one. And they tried to create something that was totally different from a city. But prior to that, there was a slightly larger park built in Brooklyn, which at that time was a much larger city than Manhattan. So it's a real interesting book. So the timing just happened to work well with what was on our agenda. I found all those things terribly interesting. So just that little tidbit out there. So that's all.
Further comment? All right. All in favor of Resolution 2013-65, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The vote is unanimous. At this point, we'll take a 5-minute recess.